It's wild how many things that were touched on. I was reflecting on myself preparing for this evening, so it's interesting to hear how, and I think always, at least for myself personally, helpful to hear how universal some of these things. I think I could hear some of myself in something that everybody shared. And that cyclical pattern is something really central to Buddhist teachings, which we'll get to. Pattern called samsara that the Buddha taught about. This repetitive becoming this person kind of over and over and over again. And that there's a way out of that. And one of the main ways he taught, obviously, was meditation, kind of stepping out of identifying with some of those patterns, particularly the way time can intensify, clock time can intensify some of those patterns of not enough time, running out of time, efficiency, and how it can kind of, lead to an internal tension in the mind or the emotional body. So what we'll do is we'll start by sitting for a little bit and really leaning into just letting that pressure kind of release from the nervous system while we're here today. So it's finding any way to sit that feels good for you. Sit for about 15 minutes, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but comfy. And if you'd like to, you can close your eyes, or you can just rest your gaze at the kind of lights on the floor, whatever feels supportive for you. And we'll begin and end with the sound of the bell. So letting the body take a few longer, slower, deeper breaths, if that feels supportive. Letting the lungs kind of open, stretch, release. And as the breath slows down, also inviting the mind, the body, the nervous system to slow down as well and to arrive. Just kind of noticing if there's any traces of energy in the mind from the day, kind of present. And starting with this simple intention, just to set down having to be anyone or having to do anything for this time. No need to be a meditator. No need to finish a work task. Just inviting yourself to take any of that unnecessary pressure and just set it down for a moment. And tuning into the rhythm of the breath that's natural. So really letting go of any control, allowing the body to breathe as the body wants to breathe. And letting the mind kind of rest in the body. So the human nervous system is wired through every limb, every organ. There's this sensory knowing in the body. So just tuning into that from the bottom of the feet to the top of the head. Embodied awareness. And we'll use that rhythm of the breath to weave together the meditation. So starting to really land on and with the breath. And softening. Noticing if the forehead or the eyes are holding any unnecessary tightness. The muscles of the brain. The mouth, the jaw. Scanning down through the shoulders. Just noticing what's happening in the shoulder blades. Is there any room for release? For the arms to hang naturally, the hands to just fall wherever they're falling. And with each out-breath and in-breath, softening through the chest and the stomach and the belly. Just allowing the thinking mind to continually fall to the background. And allowing the body and the breath to come to the foreground of the attention. Noticing that lower belly, if there's any holding or tension, and if the breath can really fill up the lower half of the lungs, not forcing anything, but just removing any potential constriction in that area. Noticing how breathing into the lower belly can help connect to the lower half of the legs. So feeling the weight of the body on the cushion. Feeling the weight of the legs, the upper legs, down through the knees. The calves, the shins, all the way down through the feet and the toes. Just spending a moment here really connecting to the earth, feeling those points of contact and this kind of mountain-like posture. Noticing the kind of simple dignity of being still. Letting any residual tension or stress in the mind or the body just release with each out-breath, melting down, pouring down through the body into the ground. And bringing the awareness to the whole body. And really settling into the breath. And the awareness itself, this quality or presence of mind, which we call mindfulness, which isn't really a thing per se, but this really simple, direct knowing. And in Buddhist meditation, the aim is freedom. For the heart and the mind to touch into what's deathless, timeless, So just letting those words kind of land. And the invitation is going to be to set down the constructs of clock time, the measuring, the kind of pressure, the day after day, the way the nervous system has to align to machines rather than the natural rhythms like the breath and the seasons and the days. So what does it feel like for this time, let the heart and the mind rest? Recognizing that the past is just a memory, future not yet arrived. So recognizing any of the ways that clock time in particular tie up the mind in knots or pressures, just allowing the heart, the body, the nervous system to be unbounded. And for the time we have left in this meditation, instead of being in the cycle of clock time, instead in the cycle of the natural rhythms of the body, allowing that to be the anchor. For this last minute or two, the invitation is to open into appreciation and gratitude and the privilege to have this time set aside to not be bound by the pressure of time. What does it feel like to allow that appreciation to land in the heart, in the body? And for that goodness to be shared with this world that we live in. May all beings know freedom. May all beings know peace. And may all beings know ease. Years back, I was working with a therapist who, she was a Zen priest. And I worked with her for like a year, at least. And I found myself at a certain point, like recognizing I am coming in and almost talking about the same thing every week. Like I'm really caught in some loops and some patterns. And that pattern at that time was a particular trigger I would come across, the aversion to that trigger, the rumination, the thinking about it, and then checking out. That was kind of the pattern that I found myself in. And so she, being the kind, compassionate therapist that she was, rather than like smacking me in the face with it and being like, dude, what are you doing? She allowed me to just see it over and over and over again until I finally kind of started to realize it. And what she would always say is, I'm really interested in cycles and patterns. It's like a very like Buddhist Zen priest thing to say, right? Like not condemning it, but being like, oh, I'm really interested in how that keeps happening over and over again, kind of inviting self-reflection. And so over time, I could kind of see that like, yeah, time was moving forward, but my mind is like kind of caught in this cycle, in this circle. Does anyone relate to this at all? Yeah. Been there? Okay. It's kind of weird. It's like everything else can change except for what's happening in my mind. It's like the same pattern. So the Buddha had a word for this endless cycle called samsara. And samsara, rather than being like a linear progression, is like the cyclical repetition shaped by what's practiced in the present moment. And so that pattern the Buddha taught was kind of the cycle of suffering, but he also taught there's like a way of releasing the mind, releasing the heart from that pattern. So that's what I want to talk about, the connection of time to this pattern, this loop, and how clock time in particular can kind of intensify some of those patterns by like the efficiency, the capitalist kind of mindset, how that impacts it, and then the possibility for freedom, for liberation, and it won't be all bad news, I promise. So one of the most common and kind of tragic patterns that's so prevalent is this idea that like, I just have to make it through today or to next week, and then things will slow down and I'll relax. I'll get there. I don't know if anyone's feeling like that with the holiday that's coming up, right? Like, oh my God, I'm almost there, and then everything's going to be chill, and I won't have any problems anymore. I remember seeing like an Instagram meme or quote that had gotten really popular. It was like, adulthood is saying, but after this week, things will slow down a bit over and over again until you die. It's like, yeah. Oh, that kind of hits. And so Buddhist teachings have kind of a simple explanation for this in a way, which is what the mind is practicing now, it builds momentum for it to be practicing it in the future. So rather, you're not doomed to repeat what you're doing now, but the neural pathways that are being laid in the brain by what's being practiced today through intention, it's more likely to be practiced in the future. So that's kind of how some of these loops happen. If I'm waking up in a frantic energy and that's how I start my day and living like that today, it's going to be more likely for that to happen tomorrow and the next day and the next week. And so it's not going to change without effort, without practice. So this is the law of karma in Buddhism. Karma meaning action, and vipaka meaning the results or the emotional layering that results from those actions. So any present-based actions tends to lead to some sort of result. It can be in the immediate future, farther down, felt experience. And so you can see how this can create a little bit of a loop. And so neuroscience over time has come to verify this. There's a common saying in neuroscience, neurons that fire together wire together. So if you think certain thought patterns, you're more increasing the chance that they will occur in the future. So rather than a linear kind of a time, the Buddha saw actually kind of a time that's cyclical and coming back to the same thing. Now, for most of human history, time was cyclical and more relational. Time was guided by daylight, seasons, rhythms of the body, before clocks, and life was organized around completion or fruition, but not minutes. And so I think we touched on this a little bit last week, but with agriculture, with more large-scale, complex societies, coordination becomes necessary. Calendars, shared time emerged all over the world now, and time became measurable, standardized, and enforceable, right? You have to follow it. If you are late, you are fired. I don't know, there's real repercussions for it. And so through that transition, human activity became synchronized to machines rather than bodies, rather than nature. And so the shift in orientation was towards efficiency and productivity rather than the priority being like well-being or a freedom of mind, right? The heart gets pulled into the performance associated with that measurement of clock time. So the Buddha taught that there is a seemingly endless cycle of birth and death happening. And so when you hear that cycle of birth and death, you might think of human life, dying, being reborn, which is part of it. But also within a year, how many times are we born into a pattern or a trait or an emotion, or in a day, or in a minute even? It's happening all the time, this kind of becoming and dying and passing away. And the Buddha taught that the suffering associated with this pattern is fueled by craving and becoming. This kind of, the word tanha, the Pali word, which means thirst, this kind of like unquenchable craving to become, to want, to grasp at things. And so the pressure of time creates kind of a really specific form of becoming. There's like identity connected to success and productivity. I don't know if anyone's experienced that, but it's rewarded. We live in a society where the more you do, the more you get, the more you're rewarded for it. And so it can be so easy to fall into a pattern of pinning self-worth and value on productivity. But it doesn't really lead to freedom. Doesn't necessarily ever arrive somewhere fully or land. It leads to often more craving and more becoming. And so this isn't to demonize work or any of that, but just to recognize how some of these patterns of suffering can be created through those structures. So the Buddha's message was that there's a way out of this cycle and the pressures of time. And for those of you that don't know, the Buddha in his time, 2,500 something years ago, taught monks, monastics, nuns, lay people, farmers, kings, sex workers, everybody, all walks of life, that there's a potential for freedom. The deepest potential for freedom in this human life doesn't come through efficiency or chasing or grasping, but it comes through the stillness of the heart. Maybe let's take a moment just to sense into that. What that can feel like in the mind to have that release of pressure. Always available, always accessible. This innate capacity in the mind to be open and free. Very simple, but not easy. So this doesn't mean, the message I'm trying to send here is not that you have to quit your job or that time is somehow bad or evil or needs to stop. But the mind can stop being run by time in a way. I think it's possible to function within the bounds of time by not being pushed and pulled by it in the way that leads to this kind of perpetual suffering. And so meditation, in so many ways, is interrupting so many of those habitual patterns, stepping out of those cycles of becoming, or at least just watching them and not identifying. One of the things I was really appreciating about going around in the circle is kind of just the sense of humor everyone could have about like what it's like to be human, right? We all have just our funny patterns that cause us stress. And just being able even to observe them begins to release the mind from being identified with them. And practiced over time can lead to greater and greater freedom. This is so much of what meditation can offer is that spaciousness and release from that pressure of time. And I'm going to hazard a guess that everyone here has some experience with that, and that's part of the draw to coming to a group like this in the middle of a hectic, busy week, to set time aside to take the pressure off. And when the heart and the mind touches that really simple freedom, the mind gets trained in something new. Instead of being trained to be in line with the clock time and the pressures of it, the heart begins to become familiar with that freedom of release. So it's possible to create new loops and patterns. And I think that, for example, a morning meditation practice, such a helpful way to free the mind from some of those patterns. So it's not in an afterlife, but it's approachable, and it's here, and it's now. The Buddha used this word for the Dharma, which is widely seen as truth or teachings. He said that it's timeless, akaliko. It's always available. And I find the fact that we're here 2,500 years ago, later, still practicing and talking about these teachings, that there's some truth to that. Freedom hasn't gone anywhere, and it's just as approachable now as it was then. So samsara, the cyclical repetition shaped by what's practiced now. And then clock time, kind of creating that sense of urgency, efficiency, the endless becoming, the kind of intensity of it. And then liberation, releasing the heart from the pressure of time. So the Buddhist approach is that, in a sense, all of experience happens in one day and one night. I've heard a teacher say one time, he took this life as one day and one night to practice. Thought that was really beautiful and powerful. I think it's so easy to go through this life caught in this feeling of not having enough time. And the Buddhist teachings were not to get more time, but how to stop postponing freedom. Ajahn Chah, one of the great Thai forest masters, used to say that living one day and one night in true practice is better than living 100 years without it. And this goes back to the Dhammapada, the words of the Buddha and the suttas. Better to live one day in fullness and in presence. And it's not because time doesn't matter, but because the opportunity is so precious to really live and be fully here.